And thanks for tuning in to Morning Live. Now, following on a very busy news week, this past weekend has been equally eventful on the political front, with the EFF launching their manifesto and the PIC board being dissolved, amongst others. Now, let's unpack some of these and other stories that have also come to light with political analyst from UNISA, Professor Lesiba Teffo. Professor, good morning and thanks so much for speaking to us.
Greetings to you, Sakina, and the listeners.
Professor, let's start with the EFF manifesto launch that took place in Tshwane this past weekend. And you, of course, I understand, attended that. Was there anything in that manifesto that you didn't expect?
Well, a lot made sense. For once, the use of the African language, almost 80% of the presentation was in that medium. And I was part of that. And I thought he spoke to mundane issue, bread and butter issues. And that's why they almost ate out of his palm. The EFF at one level, I think they made education fashionable to the extent that they themselves, they lead from the front in terms of studying and getting qualifications. And now, if the woodwork man says today, let's put emphasis on education. Let's make it fashionable. Let's go back to school. Let's make it compulsory, right? Then you can say he speaks with some authority, with some confidence, and he can send out there that yesterday I was condemned, vilified as a woodworker, but today I'm a master's student, so it is doable, it's possible. On that front, I was happy with him. Again, they mentioned something about the provinces. Nothing new there. You and I know. In about 2004, that idea was mooted by the ANC. The change of the Electoral Act in order to make it possible for people to elect their own people was also part of that debate. So he spoke to some of the issues that resonated with me. The question of state capacity, doing away with the tenders. I keep saying there were a lot of the apartheid system as an ideology was odious and repugnant, but there were good things in terms of system. The work ethic was very high. And you knew on a Sunday or on a Saturday, if there was a burst pipe in the village, there will be an old man on a bike running around to fix it, and he will report on Monday. So the tenders caused all sorts of problems and even affected the work ethic of my people. So I thought when you do away with it, as they mooted that, and I think as Makura, the premier, is also mooting that, it might be one way of redeeming the ruling party and helping the country forward.
But how do you reconcile that with the objective that it actually gave rise to perhaps this tender system, in part the economic empowerment of previously disadvantaged communities?
Look, the problem with us, and that's where we want an advice, that you probably could be a better Lord because you are the last people to be liberated on the African continent. But we seem to have learned nothing out of that. Because, yes, to create a middle class, I think that was what was wanted. To empower black people, that's what was wanted. But we were in the first. How did other people get it right? Right? If anything, if in the first 10 years we have realized we have made a mistake, why didn't we change course and say what is doable and work on that? Just to pretend that we are different from the rest of the African continent, or we want to be different. It didn't work. It doesn't work. And I hear people say, maybe it's time we review the policies, including affirmative action, including black economic empowerment. Those are the policies that bedeviled the situation as is right now. And the ruling party, to some extent, is in all sorts of problems precisely because of that. Wrong people came into the fray, and indeed incapable and incompetent mediocrity was celebrated and elevated. Now that you want to change the system, you have my vote. I can assure you, we can be better. Botswana is doing well. Mauritius is doing well. There are lessons to learn from those, let alone those who are in the West. I'm just talking about immediate examples.
Now, you did touch briefly on that not so subtle swipe on the policies, education policies of the ruling party that the EFF manifesto addressed. And amongst other things, they say that they will do away with this 30% pass and up it to 50%, and also that it would be compulsory for all children to attend school because the government will be paying for it. How practical do you think those solutions would be?
Look, sometimes it's the symbolism of it that is important. But what I want people at least not to forget, or those who don't know, let them know, that under apartheid, I know in my time that in my township, if the policeman saw you during school hours, you started running away. You just started running away. If you saw a yellow mellow, that is the baggie of the police, you just started running away. Otherwise, they bundle you and they take you back to school. A single policeman indeed lived the motto that says, it takes a village to raise a child. That was then. That was compulsory education in another sense. That the whole society, the whole village had a moral obligation to ensure that children go to school. To that extent, I get it. You are talking the economics of it. And I say, to the extent possible, those who need help, let them be helped. But very few people indeed fail to go to school precisely because of lack of money. We just use that as an excuse in many instances. And we go to school, we don't attend to what we are supposed to do, then we want to blame parents, we want to blame the state while we were at university and concentrate on wrong things. It is doable, and indeed I say, to the extent possible, let's help those who cannot help themselves.
Professor Teffo, the other question that, of course, is high up on the agenda for the EFF has been since they began this particular party is the land question. And amongst the things they say is that they will establish a People's Land Council and that at least a minimum of 50% of the land should be controlled by women and the youth. Now, again, the practicality of this, did they offer enough in terms of the how to do and implement these particular items on their wish list?
Look, I am for land reform and land transformation. And when I listen to Malema speak, I just understand that at one stage he plays to the gallery, right? But when you say you want to give land to the women, the economy of Africa in the main is driven by women. So if you do that, you'll be doing the right thing. But let's not forget that at one time, at one level, it's just idealistic. When you want to say the state, the main thing there is to nationalize the land and to nationalize the banks, right? We know that won't work, right? And there's no way that is working under the sun. Wherever attempts to that effect are made, we know the challenges and the problem that the people face. But yes, let's allow, where possible, people to be given the land, because not everybody has. And indeed, don't take land that is productive. Don't take land from those who are working the land. You have got absentee landlords. Why not take the land from there? You have got state land. You have got land owned by state enterprises. When you have exhausted that, then you will get my support when you say, I'm going for those who have more and I will expropriate without compensation. And you don't even have to change the act, by the way. Section 25 as is provides for that. And I think it was Mhlante and them who once said, we just lacked the political will to do the right thing. Otherwise, there is an empowering legislation, in particular Section 25 of the Constitution.
It is, of course, an election year, and I would have loved to get into the details of why you believe that nationalization perhaps won't work, but I'm sure we'll have much more time in the lead up to the election to discuss this, because I want to move on to other issues before we run out of time. Julius Malema also went on to say that former President Jacob Zuma must be arrested. He must be taken to jail. What's your view on this?
No. Look, yeah, in Afrikaans they say more practice and unspractice coming up in. Just last week he was telling us him and Zuma kissed and they made up. Now they are brothers in arms. Now suddenly he wants him in jail. Look, in terms of process, I'm saying let's allow the commission to do its work and let people, based on the principle presumption of innocence until proven guilty, be allowed to be heard by the commission. But indeed, I agree with the Deputy Chief Justice. But where there is absolute necessity and urgency, yes, let's allow the processes to run concurrently and let those who should be brought to book find themselves in that situation. Yes, I'm not in favor of many processes until it is concluded, but there are instances where we can't wait anymore.
But what about the law enforcement agencies? Speaking of processes running concurrently, should they now wait until the conclusion of these various commissions of inquiry, or do they, in instances where they may have sufficient evidence to go on, should they start acting?
Look, there are instances where there was insufficient evidence to prosecute. Now, these commissions are helping the investigators, the NPA and them, those who had minimum information. Now, at least if you get a supplement from whatever quarter, then why not proceed? And I think that's what the Deputy Chief Justice said last week, say, please go and investigate this in particular, and if necessary, I would recommend that other state institutions begin to act on those. Yes, indeed, where it is doable, let them begin to act right away.
And then I want to pulse you on what's happening with the PIC and also the commission into that. Now, we had the non-executive members of that board resigning. What's your take on what's happening there? And again, also in terms of what ought to happen with trying to put this particular entity back on the right path?
Yeah, two things for me. What we cannot dispute, Zakina, is that the PIC had not covered itself in glory in the past 10 years. Let's not, there's no beating about the bush as far as that is concerned. And I think in the eyes of the majority of the people, it has lost credibility. That's the first point. So, yes, indeed, I think it's the right thing for the guys to say we are stepping down en masse, just in the interest of that organization. But the other side of it is the one that says, who are the people who are going to be appointed into the interim and the substantive board? As long as you are going to deploy cadres who see themselves as being beholden to those who are deployed, who have deployed them, again we will find ourselves exactly where we are, and nothing will change. And somebody next door will say to me, yes, Teffo, the more things change, the more they remain the same.
Now, Professor, Eskom, very briefly, again, Eskom refusing to divulge the names of countries of origin of the banks, international banks that will be assisting them with financing. And we had a similar incident with the IPPs, and again, a refusal to divulge who those actual beneficiaries were. What should we make of this?
Yes. I mean, those are public institutions, public resources are going to be used, and the public wants to know, and you deny them the right to know. Then you are raising a reasonable suspicion that something is amiss there. And you know, in South Africa, there is also legislation that will compel you to disclose that information. Should you be pushed to that extent? By that time, you shall have lost a lot of credibility in the court of public opinion.
Well, Professor, unfortunately, we have to leave it there. There's so much I still wanted to speak to you about, but unfortunately, we have to park it. And thanks so much for your time this morning. And Professor Lesiba Teffo from UNISA speaking to us about some of the developments, political stories coming through over the past weekend. And with that, it's time.